Interesting facts about the Bible. Did you know that there is a concept in Judaism called Picuach nefesh that Yeshua himself references in Scripture? Picuach nefesh means preserving or saving a life. And the idea is that preserving a life is more important than any other commandment or law in Scripture because life is precious. This is based off of Leviticus 18:5. You shall therefore keep my statutes, which if a man do, he shall live by them. And then the rabbis added that he shall live by them and not that he shall die by them. Yeshua was often accused of breaking God's commandments. And though we don't actually see Pekuach Nefesh written out in Scripture, the only place in canonized Scripture it is referenced is by Yeshua himself. Many religious leaders then and today take the commandments of God and make them an idol in it of themselves. So these laws that God gave us to help us that we can have life, we end up taking to the extreme that we're willing to die or let other people suffer just for the sake of that law. So in Mark 2, starting in verse 23, it says, it happened on Shabbat that Yeshua was going through the grain fields, and his disciples began to make their way plucking the heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, look, why are they doing what is not permitted on Shabbat? And he said to them, haven't you ever read what David did when he was in need and he and those with him became hungry, how he entered into the house of God and ate the showbread, which is permitted only for the priests to eat? This is a reference to Picuach Nefesh. David and his men are starving. They are so hungry that he goes into the temple and he takes the showbread that is meant for the priests there. And because it is an emergency and the preservation of the life was more important than the rituals of the showbread, it was allowed. And even as they continue to accuse him of breaking Shabbat, by healing and other things, he says in Luke 14:5, what man, if his donkey or ox falls into a pit, won't help it out on the Sabbath day? The preservation of the life is more important. Many people use the law of God to try to control and manipulate people in a negative way and a way that God never intended. So in Matthew 5:31, where Yeshua is talking about divorce, he says, it was said, whoever sends his wife away, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. And so people take this verse to say the only way a person can get divorced is if one of the other people cheat on each other. And I have seen and heard of churches pushing women to stay with an abusive husband who is not providing for her, who is harming her or harming the children, and tells her she has to stay with her husband or she may never get married again. But like with most scripture, people are not considering context, and Yeshua was addressing a sin of the Pharisees of divorcing their wife over anything and taking a new wife and divorcing her again and passing around women. It was a way to be promiscuous but still find a loophole within the law so that they're not sinning. So Yeshua was addressing them and their sin. And it is taken out of context and it's used to force women and men to stay in situations that are just not safe or healthy for them. And they're told it's simply their cross that they have to bear in this life. Yeshua specifically says here in Luke 4:18 and 19, he has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free the oppressed. And again in John 10:10, the thief comes only to steal, slaughter, and destroy. I have come that they might have life and have it abundantly. It has never been Adonai's intention for you to live in pain, in fear, in slavery, to feel trapped. That has never been his intention, because he came for you to have life and life abundantly. No matter what church you are going to, what teachings they have, That is against the very heart of God. You do not have to stay in a situation where you are not safe, where you are not cared for, where you are not provided for in the way that God has called you to be. He has come to set every captive free and to give you life and life abundantly. And because of Picuach nefesh, whatever laws are there that are there to protect us and benefit us, if they are no longer preserving your life, you are able to break that commandment in order to preserve life. It was never God's intention for you to live as a prisoner, to be hurt or harmed, and to live without hope, because that's the opposite of what God brings.